Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces a major job summit aimed at improving productivity and helping get more women into the workforce. JB Hi-Fi, Block and Flight Centre named as favourites of short sellers, and that's bad news. And Hungry Jack's takes on the McCafe. It's Tuesday, the 12th of July, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Are you well?
I'm going well, thank you. How's day 2 of the Gold Coast? I'm a little bit jealous of you being, especially when you sent us a photo yesterday of your view and looking out across the water and the sunrise and all of that. It felt a little bit like you were rubbing it in.
Oh, no, absolutely. And it's fine up here and it's 19 degrees and I know where you are, it's wet and cold. So I will be sending a photo probably, every 3 or 4 hours just to point out where I am.
Oh, there's the Sean Aylmer we all know and love. It's good to have you back. We missed you when you were in Hawaii as well. Okay, let's move on, shall we? We've got a good chat today coming up with Robbie Baskin, who is the founder of Frontier, which is a company that's developed a way of helping potential home buyers who don't have the upfront deposit. It's a different model. Really good chats coming up a bit later on. But the main story this morning, Sean, the federal government will hold a national jobs and skills summit in early September with the goal of driving reform in participation, productivity, migration, and in women's economic activity.
About 100 leaders from businesses and unions are expected to gather with politicians and civil society groups. And the hope is some ideas can be implemented in the very short term, potentially before the end of the year. The key focus will be boosting productivity. Achieving more output with the same amount of input is the cornerstone of economic progress. And with the unemployment rate under 4%, the summit doesn't really need to focus on job creation as such. It just needs to consider how to be smarter about the workforce. While changing tax rules won't be part of the reforms, easing migration caps to bring more foreign workers into Australia and a new Jobs and Skills Australia agency will. So too will efforts to improve the enterprise bargaining system. Several senior ministers will be in charge of developing different reforms. Finance Minister Katie Gallagher will oversee work on women's employment, for example. Employment Minister Tony Burke will coordinate a work stream on job security and wages and so on.
Sean, I've got to say, it sounds very Hawke Keating-esque a little.
It does, though it's nowhere near as broad-based as that summit back in 1983, which included churches and welfare groups and state and local governments, as well, of course, as unions and business. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese yesterday said he hoped employers and unions would work together because they have a common interest, which he said was the national interest. The government hopes it will throw up ideas, particularly around participation and opportunity. There are nearly 500,000 job vacancies across the economy at the moment, and not finding people to fill roles is a serious retardant to economic growth. Now, more backpackers is a quick fix. Better childcare allowing more women into the workforce is a medium to long-term fix. They're the types of things that they'll be considering.
So, Sean, are the potential participants actually enthusiastic about the summit? It all sounds good, but would it actually make a difference?
Well, it does come down to the participants. The ACTU Secretary Sally McManus said it was a good opportunity to address the broken bargaining system. The Business Council of Australia Chief Executive Jennifer Westacott said it will be an opportunity to reset the economy. Good start when those sorts of people are saying those sorts of things. The Federal Department of Treasury will use the summit to develop a white paper to be handed down within 12 months. Now, I never like the sound of someone developing a white paper. However, hopefully that will provide the basis of long-term reform, and that's the whole goal of it.
Okay. How did the local share market go yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 finished down a little over 1% to 6,602 points. The big iron ore miners were sold off sharply. BHP was down 2.7%, while Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals were both off around 2%. The banks were also weaker, with Macquarie Group down 1.8% and National Australia Bank off 1.3%. There was plenty of red across the market. In fact, around 3/4 of the top 200 stocks lost ground yesterday. Telstra was one of the few large caps to end up in positive territory. That was up about 0.6%. Among the hardest hit was online property group REA Group, down more than 4%. Miner South32, gaming machine manufacturer Aristocrat Leisure, Gold Digger Newcrest, and building materials company James Hardie all fell more than 2%.
And what about global markets?
Well, Chinese tech stocks tumbled yesterday after market leaders Alibaba and Tencent were hit with new fines. That certainly gave investors the jitters. Wall Street investors are ready for the June quarter earnings season starting in the next couple of days, with a number of the big banks reporting first. Analysts believe earnings will be up about 5.7%. Now, that would be the slowest growth rate since late 2020. But if you take out the energy sector, which has been on fire because of that war in Ukraine, the figure's likely to be closer to 3%. And that's why people are worried about a recession in the US. Brent crude, Michael, is trading around $105 a barrel. Gold is at $1,740 an ounce. The Aussie dollar is trading around 68 US cents. Certainly confidence about the currency recovering has dissipated somewhat. Commonwealth Bank currency analysts yesterday came out and said they're forecasting the unit to fall to about 65 US cents by the end of the year. In the cryptocurrency market, experts expect the Bitcoin collapse to get much worse. The latest MLIV Pulse survey shows that 60% of respondents think it's more likely that Bitcoin will head towards $10,000 a unit rather than $30,000 a unit. It's currently trading around that $20,000 a unit point.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese responded yesterday to a slightly limp olive branch from Beijing. I think that's probably the best way to describe it, saying that Australia would act in its own national interest.
Yes, over the weekend, the Chinese foreign minister had pretty much outlined preconditions for relations to improve, including acting as partners, not rivals, seeking common ground and rejecting third-party manipulation, which really is a slight at Canberra's relationship with Washington. Mr. Albanese said Australia will cooperate with China wherever we can, and he wants to build good relations with all countries. But he warned that the meeting between the foreign ministers of the two countries over the weekend was a step forward only, and Australia has not changed its position.
Okay, now the COVID death toll, Sean, has accelerated with 13 deaths in the 24 hours to yesterday morning. It's much better than the past couple of years, but still an increase.
Vaccinations have made the severity of COVID much less, but people are still catching the virus. Now, there were more than 32,000 new infections reported across the country yesterday, with the Omicron variants BA4 and BA5 becoming the dominant strains. Friday last week, Michael, there were 42,000 cases reported and 35 fatalities. So we still have a long, long way to go. Remember, around 7.4 million Australians yesterday became eligible to receive a fourth jab. We've always been proponents of people getting vaccinated. Go out, make an appointment with your chemist, with your doctor, and get the fourth jab.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Now, Sean, I'm interested in this story. I mentioned it at the top of the show. Short sellers are in the market, taking positions in a number of household names. Now, short selling is one of those things that always takes me a little while to get my head around.
Yes, maybe we'll do a quick lesson on short selling first. It basically involves borrowing a security, borrowing a share, and selling it in the open market, taking the gamble in the future when you have to repay what you've borrowed, you'll be able to buy the share back at a lower price. So, short sellers are really taking a bet that a share price will fall, not just by a bit, but by a fair amount. So if you want to follow the money when investing, watching what short sellers do is always interesting. Now, we always say this isn't an investment podcast. Get some professional advice. And you've got to remember, short sellers aren't always right. Over the years, they've lost lots of money on a few stocks like Domino's and JB Hi-Fi. At the moment, the most shorted stocks in the retail sector are JB Hi-Fi, that's back on the list, Temple & Webster, Redbubble and Kogan. That's according to the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. But there are some other big names who have been shorted, where at least 10% of their stock has been on-sold. So shorted is the way we put it. Block's one of those that used to be Afterpay. Flight Centre is another. Healthcare Group, Nanosonics is another. Doesn't mean they're going to go down, but certainly short sellers are putting their money where their belief is and betting against those stocks.
You mentioned that this was on an ASIC list, Sean. So short selling is something that ASIC keeps a pretty close eye on, I'm guessing.
Yeah, very much. And every security on the exchange, you can see exactly a number of short sellers in those. Now, those three that I mentioned, Block, Flight Centre and Nanosonics, are all beyond that 10% level. Most of the companies are somewhere between 0 and 2%. So when you see such big rises in short selling activity, you wonder what's going on, I suppose.
Well, thank you for the lesson. I definitely, I took it all in, and I reckon I'd be able to repeat it back to you tomorrow. Don't test me, please.
No, I won't.
All right. Now, nothing like a battle, Sean, between the fast food chains. Hungry Jack's, which is owned by rich lister Jack Cowan, wants to take on McDonald's McCafe brand.
So Jack's Cafe is rolling out in 410 Hungry Jack stores. The group is late to the market, really, but the strategy is to take advantage of the move to drive-through barista coffees. Apart from McDonald's, there's no major player in that market in Australia. About 2/3 of Hungry Jack's business is drive-through, and the group wants to sell more to those people than burgers and chips. Hungry Jack's CEO Chris Green told the Financial Review that the rollout has been going on for more than 2 years so far. It's cost about $20 million, and the company has trained more than 5,000 baristas. So now you'll be able to get your coffee at Hungry Jack's just like you can at McDonald's.
Sean, Link Administration has rejected Canadian group Dye & Durham's improved $4.57 a share bid and upgraded its profit guidance.
I reckon this takeover can pretty much fall into the long run category now, Michael. We seem to have been talking about it forever. Remember, the initial bid last year was much higher than the current bid. It was actually at $5.50. It fell sharply, though, as a result of volatility in financial markets and competition concerns over Link's 42% stake in conveyancing group PEXA. Now, the latest offer of $4.57 has been rejected by Link's board. Basically, the board said it was unable to recommend the revised bid. The share price is trading well below that, so it doesn't look like investors and shareholders think the deal will get done anyway.
EML Payments, which is the payments group that has struggled with its operations in Ireland, yesterday lost its chief executive, who resigned, sending its share price down 24%.
Yeah, incredible. Tom Cregan stepped down without giving a reason. Mr. Cregan has run the business for 10 years, taking it from a small tech business to a payments system business operating in 32 countries. Most recently, he's been at the forefront of the group's efforts to ward off the potential class action relating to its purchase of an Irish business in late 2019. Now, shareholders don't like it when there's no reason given for a CEO departure, hence the dumping of shares yesterday. Mr. Cregan will be replaced by director Emma Shand. EML's share price is off more than 60% this year.
And in New South Wales, Sean, the Perrottet government is getting a bit of a kicking at an inquiry into why former Deputy Premier John Barilaro was given a plum US trade post after he left politics.
Yes, Mr. Barilaro never took up the role. He was forced to give it up basically on the back of the public backlash. Yesterday, a senior state public servant, Jane West, said she'd been verbally offered the post and was later told that the role was being given as a present to someone else. That's when Mr. Barilaro got the gig. It is not a good look for the Perrottet government.
Yeah, certainly not. All right, moving on to overseas news. And Sean, Macau has shut down in an attempt to control the spread of COVID-19. And that's had a big impact on some of the world's largest casino operators.
Share prices of the big gaming groups tumbled after the city closed down all business venues, with Macau's 6 casinos being forced to shut their doors. All residents are banned from leaving their homes unless they're buying groceries or some other essential service. This comes after 59 new cases were reported on Sunday, taking the total number in the city since June 18, so that's over about 3 weeks, to 1,536. Now, by comparison, Sydney's 7-day average for a 24-hour period is 11,000. Incredible what happens when you've got a zero COVID policy.
Yeah, indeed. And Sean, there's been some pretty dramatic scenes over the past few days with Chinese bank depositors clashing with police.
Thousands of customers opened accounts at 6 rural banks in the Henan and Anhui provinces. Now, they were lured by higher interest rates. They later found they couldn't withdraw the funds after reports that the head of the bank's parent company was wanted for financial crimes and he'd fled. Crowds descended on the banks, facing off with police. Now, some were forcibly removed. What's gotten the depositors, and in fact the general populace, even more upset is that it appears that a COVID-19 tracking app that Chinese people have had to download was used to prevent the bank depositors from mobilising. They were told that they weren't allowed to move around their community when, in fact, there wasn't a COVID outbreak. They were actually trying to stop the skirmishes outside the banks. So it's quite a tricky situation for the Chinese government to handle this.
Yeah, certainly is. And how about this story, Sean? I love this. New York's most expensive penthouse is up for sale again. Last time around, it went for $169 million US.
Yes, this is an apartment we're talking about, not a house. It's a big apartment. It's got 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, pretty good views, I'd imagine. It's up for sale again for close to 250 million Aussie dollars. But there's a hitch. The building at the bottom of Central Park, the south end of Central Park, is a skinny skyscraper. Now, they've started appearing around major cities around the world and incredibly tall, built in 2014. It's actually higher than the Empire State Building, but there's a problem. It makes creaking, banging, and clicking noises as it sways in the wind. I don't think I'll be bidding for that one.
No, it sounds like it's a bit of a fixer-upper, really, isn't it? For $169 million US. There we go.
There we
Now,
go.
all right, up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview, and today you're speaking with Robbie Baskin, the founder of Frontier.
Yeah, we were talking about this at the top of the show. There are many different ways people are coming up with to help people trying to get into the home loan market. The Bank of Mum and Dad is one example. The rent to buy is another. This is a third example whereby Frontier is helping people find the deposit and then taking a chunk of the equity in the house being bought. And then hopefully the person who is buying the house can actually buy out Frontier. It's just a really interesting new way of thinking about home buying.
Yeah, it's a different model. It's well worth a listen. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 12th of July, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.